All right. Hello and welcome everyone. We are here after we have already, hopefully, seen um, the why is it not showing the proper thing? It is not wanting to show the proper view right now for some reason. Whatever. We'll just have to go with gallery view. Uh, the hopefully everyone has actually seen the World War II lecture, which I sent out the link multiple times. You will also be watching next week that same thing. Reason being, I will actually be getting my second COVID vaccine, and I can't, and they forced me to schedule it on during class. So, um, luckily, hopefully, you guys actually liked the production value of that with the background music and everything. Um, the but we're here to discuss its content, not its production value. Um, Also, I literally just a few minutes ago finished grading everything for everyone. So, has everybody been able to access your grades and see the remarks on them? Yeah, good. We'll have some time today to discuss that and discuss the test and what you can do to improve and everything. But all in all, I think everybody did pretty well, especially on the reading journals. I think we only had a few people do poorly on that. We I think the average came out to on the reading journals to a high B, and on the midterm it was a um low B. So that's pretty good. You guys did really well. Um, so um, having seen that World War II lecture, the the pull up the actual lecture notes. For some reason, they got closed in the background. Hold on a second. But as you might recall, come on. What the heck? Oh, weird. It's not coming up. There we go. Finally. Having trouble pulling up the lecture notes. I'm sorry about that. Um, so uh, the main thing is, as you could tell from the theme of the lecture, is that it was, everything changes, right? The whole trajectory of American history takes a hard turn. What are some of the main things that you guys took away from that? What are the main things that you think will, basically continues to affect your life today here in the United States? You know, in terms of that change from World War II.
Well, I'd say one would be a definite introduction to the workforce of women, which before this time had not really occurred, and that would be more of a mainstay that would only grow from that time period.
In a way, yeah. Though it is important to note that women have actually always had a pretty prominent place in the workforce, especially in while we were quite an industrial society. We will talk many lectures from now. We'll be talking about um, the deindustrialization of the United States and the replacement of the industrial economy with what is called a service economy, which is what we're in today. But throughout the industrial period, we had a large amount of women working. It's just World War II certainly saw a huge influx of women um, taking up men's jobs as men were, of course, going off to war. And then this kind of does, we will see later on in the class as well, that this influx of women in the workplace sparks off a what is called second wave feminism, and will lead to things like the Equal Rights Amendment and a lot of craziness in the 70s, and a lot of modern politics today is based off of what happened because of all that. So this is kind of a starting point for a new women's rights movement. So what else?
We also got a change in warfare with the atom bomb's creation and just how it was fought, and the threat of those always going off after that has always been a big, like a big deal.
Yeah, well, in fact, the lecture for next week will be going into that quite heavily. Interestingly enough, the U.S. actually maintained nuclear supremacy from 1945 all the way until 1948. So for 3 years, the U.S. actually had nuclear supremacy, as in no one else had nukes, and so there were a few times that Harry S. Truman, the president during that period, would periodically threaten Stalin, saying, if you don't do this, we're going to use nukes, and Stalin would kind of back off. We see that happen in Iran. We see that happen in Berlin. There's quite a few times where the U.S. uses that nuclear superiority, but Truman himself was actually quite reticent to even say that. When, for instance, with Berlin, we'll see that there was a lot of other tactics used to deal with the Berlin crisis. So it is, while nuclear bombs today function as basically this sort of Damocles sitting over all of our heads, right at the end of the war, that wasn't actually the case. The U.S. was the only country with bombs, had very few bombs to begin with. For instance, the only 2 functional ones that were made during the war were dropped on Japan. There was no extra bombs. The U.S. was threatening to use more if Japan didn't surrender, but we actually didn't have any to use at that point. It took until the end of the year before a couple more would be manufactured up in Washington. So there's a lot of nuance to what that bomb means at the end of World War II, but we will talk a lot more about that next week. What else?
It helped establish the US as a superpower on the world scene. We were seen like as a large power before then, but it really kind of drove home the fact that we had as much influence as we did.
Yeah. At the end of World War II, there was no country that had been less devastated by the war, left on who had actually participated in the war, of course. Places like South America generally didn't have it. There was Argentina declared war on Germany in like early 1945, a little bit late to do anything. But much of Latin America especially did not participate in the war, and therefore were not devastated by it. But the US had militarized to such an extent that really no one could challenge us after the war, not just because of nuclear bombs, but because of pure military might. something to think about throughout the next couple of weeks is that the draft was passed in 1940, right? You guys remember that part? It actually happens before the US enters the war, and yet that draft would continue all the way until 1973. So, well, 71, sorry. The war in Vietnam continues until 73, but they end the draft in 71. So throughout this period, there's in right after World War II, of course, it's peacetime, and yet people are still getting drafted into the military. Although something to note is that the draft is actually more of a recruiting tool than an actual way of bringing more people into the army. It's the threat of being drafted that actually drives a lot of recruitment. So at no point during the war was were conscripted soldiers ever a majority of troops. It's always used as a kind of way of like, if you don't join, you will get drafted, and it's better to volunteer than to get drafted. And I see Andrew said we had the United Nations established so that might be able to avoid another world war. And yeah, the UN still serves a peacekeeping function all over the world, and there's kind of an open question why the Cold War never heated up to a world war. We'll see next week that the Cold War comes pretty darn close a few times, but the main thing is that it doesn't turn into a world war. And some people might argue that that it's the UN that ultimately stops another world war from breaking out. The most devastating war that's happened since World War II was the Second Congolese War of 2004 to 5. That ended up killing something like 4 or 5 million people, but has a lot more deeper roots than just what happened there. It was kind of a Pan-African war, but that's the most deadly war that we've seen since World War II. So, one could say, well, historians like to call this period sometimes the long peace, since history is so often bookended by large scale wars. The lack of a large scale war, though, peace is a relative term, of course, but the fact that we haven't had a large scale war might be because of the UN. And we're definitely in some of the most peaceful times in human history currently. Though the news might make it seem like that, like it's otherwise, especially the craziness from last year. Despite that, we have less crime than we've had in ages. The 50s was actually a pretty good time for crime until there was a wave of crime during the 60s, but we're actually lower murder rates currently than ever before in our history. And that's actually across the Western world. So World War II is quite a breaking point in terms of just global violence, and the UN certainly has a part to play in that. What else? I mean, we can just keep on going on this question, right? There's just tons of things. But keep that in mind when you're watching these lectures, taking your notes and everything, that this is stuff that affects you today. This isn't just, oh, cool World War II history or anything like that. It's something that affects you to the present. with those kinds of good things that come from the war, far more peace. Obviously, nuclear bombs are debatable in terms of how good they are, but that's another thing that has been argued about whether or not nuclear bombs have actually promoted peace. The fact that people don't want to use them in war is another reason why major powers do not fight each other anymore. But there's many arguments to be made about that, and I'm sure we can get into that next week. But what about some of the effects from the war that could be viewed as a detriment, as something bad that's long lasting? Kind of alluding to the Japanese, right? In Japanese Americans.
Well, yes, there's the damage that came generationally through the Japanese American internment, but I was thinking more of what maybe the ideologies that were born that World War II was meant to kill off, but are still subsisting today. Neo-Nazism, ultra-nationalism, which weren't exactly born right before World War II, but were very much exacerbated and cemented in history because of it.
Yeah, well, the Nazis came to power in Germany in 1933, kind of 32 actually, but we still have problems with neo-Nazis, right? But that neo actually is doing a lot in that word. The Nazi Party itself is no longer a threat of any sort. It's, well, unless you live in Greece, but we don't live there. But generally, the Nazi Party is a far, far fringe group. What's quite the threat is, revivals of fascism and that in general. And fascism doesn't necessarily mean that you're a member of an explicitly fascist party. Fascism often is just dictatorial nationalism, right? Nationalism about reviving some lost great nation to national greatness, and often organized around some sort of leader, especially if it's fairly populist. There's a lot of reasons why people called Trump fascist during his time, because there are a lot of significant parallels there. And while you can certainly debate the efficacy of such a comparison, the fact that that kind of thing continues to be part of this, I don't know if you can really relate it to World War II, but it is certainly a problem. What else? What came from Japanese internment? Anybody can unmute themselves and say something about the lasting effects that came from Japanese internment. We did in the lecture, there was a bit of talk about, you know, forgetting the word for it, some sort of payment as reparations. There were reparations given, but there's some lasting effects there, right? What are those?
Well, I mean, there's the whole idea, like the lasting effect of that. How do I word this? I mean, like culturally, there was like a separation between those that were, I think, held in internment camps, and then I'm not really sure what I'm trying to say. Hold on.
It's a difficult issue, that right? So
Oh,
take
yeah.
your time.
Just generationally, there's been this cultural separation, and it seems like even among, their own culture, there's been kind of like this feeling of maybe not disgust, but of just
Distrust.
yes. I think that's more of like what it is, because they were more those that were they were more Americanized, I think, so that it definitely caused a cultural rift that definitely causes pain still today. I don't know. That's kind of a difficult question.
Mhm. Well, culturally, yeah, there's definitely some baggage there, right? Somebody's trying to call me. It's a horrible time to call. But oh, and it's a robocall. Great. Been seeing an uptick of those, but there's certainly cultural baggage that came with it, right? There's this this distrust of the U.S. government instilled in the Japanese population that would take generations to build back up. Realize prior to the war, remember the immigration lecture that we it was like week 2 or something like that. That the quota system had been imposed, and the quota system almost completely eliminated Japanese immigration into the United States. So it wouldn't be until the repeal of the quota system and the current system that we have today, which was implemented in 1965, where Japanese people would be able to immigrate in large numbers again. So there's this concept in Japanese Japanese American culture called basically dividing generational experience from when a family immigrated. So you have the Issei, who are like the first immigrants into the United States, and then subsequent generations are seen as separated in but still rooted in that progenitors, that Issei's family line. And considering Issei's were literally the first ones targeted by internment, as enemy aliens, that has instilled a huge cultural rift, even generationally. There's many famous Japanese Americans who were interned. For instance, you guys know George Takei. He's Sulu, not Sulu. Is a character on Star Trek, right? He was an internee when he was a little kid, and that has certainly stuck with him. He's actually done some recent documentary work on that. But there's also generational wealth that is a problem with this. How is it also an economic problem?
I believe that the people who were taken to the internment camps and then maybe like own businesses or something like that, they had to sell it off for a percentage of what it was worth and not get the full type of the full payment.
Yeah. I mean, many people had to sell their homes. Many people who didn't sell their homes ended up having it basically sold for them. And you can guess the amount of money coming from that, especially during World War II, is not exactly enough to compensate for the loss, right? And something that I want you guys to keep in the back of your mind throughout the rest of this semester is that we're going to be talking a lot about systems of that, such as like Jim Crow and this internment and everything. Keep in mind, Jim Crow is still going on during World War II. That while the system, the problem, such as Jim Crow or internment, is long gone, there are lasting effects that last to this day. So part of the problem with generational wealth, such as owning a house, is that the next generation will not be able to inherit that wealth. And so that American dream of owning your own home with the white picket fence and a good job and good retirement and all that kind of stuff is less easily achieved when you don't have that generational wealth to back you up. And this severed an entire generation of Japanese Americans from their generational wealth. So there's not just lasting effects in terms of social conditions and cultural conditions, but economic conditions, creating kind of an underclass. So the war had quite a negative effect on some people, but let's talk about economics, about the war. What did the rest of the United States experience economically because of this war?
Well, there's like a big call for people to be supporting the war effort. So a lot of the manufacturing and production went towards the war effort. Things like like making tanks or whatever they needed to do to support the soldiers overseas. So we had a huge uptick in like manufacturing and things like that.
And what I mean, think about what the preceding decade had been like. What did the war do in terms of the Great Depression? And you're already halfway there, right? You're talking about
I mean,
a big boost in economic output. So what did that do?
that helped lower the national debt, I guess, and it helped us to end the Great Depression. It helped us to get back on track. It helped the economy get back on track.
Mm-hmm. It ended the Great Depression. So you might remember at the end of the Great Depression lecture that we talked about how the U.S. went from, it's a song from the 1940s that said, we went from Dr. New Deal to Dr. Win the War. And what they're talking about is a doctor administering the economy, diagnosing the economy, and the prescription is no longer New Deal, but win the war. And certainly by the end of the war, the U.S. is no longer in a depression. Record low unemployment, basically full employment for the first and only time in U.S. history. Unemployment was less than 0.5%, and unemployment would remain significantly low all the way until the late 60s, and people started freaking out about the rise in unemployment during what's called deindustrialization. And mind you, they were freaking out in like 1969 about unemployment reaching as high, oh my gosh, as 4.5%. Pretty much your entire life, there's been more than 4.5% unemployment. We actually got below that for a little bit in 2019 and early 2020, and then 2020. But imagine a point when there was literally less than 0.5% of unemployment. We've never, unless you lived through World War II, you have never seen that kind of employment. So yeah, it ended the Great Depression. Heck of a way to end it too, right? So think about all these things, especially when we're talking about how to complete the test and that. I don't remember what was the assigned readings. Hold on a second. There we are. Oh, we got first. So did you guys check out that song in the assigned readings yet? It's actually a pretty fun and dark song. But it's your first taste of in 2 weeks, I believe. Let me make sure I got my dates right. 3 weeks. Okay. In 3 weeks, you're actually going to have a bunch, instead of reading primary sources, it will be a playlist from YouTube of music that very much like the song that is assigned for this week, which is I believe it's from the Almanac Singers, if I remember correctly. Yeah, okay, that's it's an anti World War II song, a World War II protest song. Did anybody get a chance to check that out already?
Yeah.
What did you think?
Quite a cheery little folk tune, I'll say. It sounds very 40s.
But also that whole bit about now Franklin Roosevelt told us exactly what he felt, right? You remember how it ends with that? So
Oh yeah, it's basically saying he was lying basically through his teeth, saying we don't like war, but going off in March, which is sounds like a not exactly a Vietnam protest song. Those got a bit different, but it's in the same ballpark.
So there's a lot of cultural meaning you can get out of that, right? You can, in your guys' journals, there is a way to think about that as juxtaposed to the other readings. For instance, well, it kind of goes alongside the Lindbergh speech, which is his famous America First speech. Lindbergh was quite the German sympathizer, and at least until Pearl Harbor. But the America First movement was trying to keep us out of the war, and the Almanac Singers are probably in agreement with him. They are also just really annoyed that a draft had been created during peacetime. But you can juxtapose that to like Roosevelt's Day of Infamy speech. This is a day that shall live in infamy. When you look at these in conversation with each other, there's a lot of meaning to get out of that. I saw some of you had actually noticed that in the reading journals thus far. A lot of people, for instance, I was quite happy to see how many of you got the juxtaposition between Helen Hunt Jackson and Frederick Jackson Turner, the Century of Dishonor versus the Frontier Thesis. Those are completely different visions of the West, right? And you can do that with basically all the readings. You can see that there's a general pattern to this stuff. So try to keep an eye out on that. Since we're talking about the assigned readings and everything, I'm sure some of you have some questions about like how to improve your grade on the reading journals. We'll get to the midterm in just a second. Any questions on that? No one? So you guys have a pretty good understanding of how to improve your grade on the reading journals, right? Everybody did pretty well, but you know, there's always improvement to be done. You know, and the main thing is think about the totality of these sources and how they're in conversation with one another. That was my most common comment on all these, was that, you know, respond to the entirety of the assigned readings, and you know, often they're in conversation with each other, so state your opinions about that as well. You know, you can't go wrong with writing more, right? With that being said, oh yeah, and Day of Infinity Speech is also a YouTube video. That's nice. You have the choice of either watching the speech or reading it. You're going to actually have a lot of those for the rest of the semester, by the way. There's going to be, you know, you'll see on the syllabus that you have a choice between a YouTube link or, you know, like this one's from Wikisource, but you know, often it's American Yop. You'll find that a lot of these you have the choice between either watching the speech or reading it. You can choose either one, but make sure that you have in fact gone through it. For instance, there's going to be I don't know, the Malays speech. That's a great example. In week 13, you'll be reading Jimmy Carter's Malays speech, but there's also a YouTube link there for watching it, and you can really hear the exasperation in his voice when you actually watch it. So, you know, there's something to be said from seeing it in its original form rather than reading it. So, any questions on you know, the sources themselves? No? Oh, this might be a fairly quick class then. Let's shift over to talking about the midterm itself, and because basically the midterm, the final will be exactly the same as the midterm. Oh, there's a hold on a second. I have to read a direct message. For hold on a second, guys. Email me directly, Harrison, about that. We'll work something out. But so with the midterms, I hope most of you kind of understand what is meant by significance, right? I saw most of you nailed it pretty well, but sometimes even within the same test, there was ones that like wouldn't have significance and they'd just be explaining the key term. So as we've talked about a lot in this class, everything is oriented around understanding the historical significance, right? So just would like to open it up to talk about that. And if you have any questions about your grades or something that might help you get it better next time.
Is there a way to look back at our answers? In the
Yeah,
test?
if you here, let's go to learn real quick. Hold on a second while I take it out of teacher view. All right, so let me screen share. All right, so in your student view, you should be able to see everything by going from this main thing to my grades. Now I can't see anything because well, I'm not taking my own test, right? But the here you'll be able to see like you know, the midterm, and if you click on that, it should say like view description or something along those lines. You know, I don't have any grades for my own user, obviously, but you'll be able to see the you can see here this graded part right here. So you can go and see what's already graded and click on it, see my comments there, so that you can you know, you should be able to see the comments there, right? Any questions on how to get there? Obviously, I can't show you like anybody's specific tests, but that's how you get there. All right, let me stop screen sharing. There you go. So are there any questions on the comments themselves and like how you can improve? Well, if you guys are all satisfied with that, we can cut this fairly short.
I'm actually not able to see the comments. Like I can see what I got on each question, but I don't see comments.
Was that Jaden or Ryan speaking?
Ryan.
So when you go to the thing, you don't see hold on, let me
Like I
switch
can
out.
look at like all the questions and it'll say like however many points out of 12.5, but
But it
I
doesn't
don't
have comments?
a comment or anything. I just see the question.
Yeah, kind of same.
Well, that's not good. Hold on a second. Let's see. Let's go to Ryan's thing. I'm not going to show anyone the actual, I will not show your guys' tests to each other, but so like for instance, on your sixth question, you don't see the phrase needs expansion.
No, I just see like what was Theodore Roosevelt campaigning for or something like that.
Yeah, all it
But
shows is the question.
You don't see the feedback.
No.
Oh boy, that's not good. I'm gonna have to get with the administrators to find out why you're not seeing that. You're supposed to be able to see that in response feedback, which should show up like right underneath the answer. That is very strange. Well, that that would explain why nobody had any questions about the responses. The feedback, because you can't see it. Wonder why it's not showing that. Well, I'm going right after this. I will contact the system administrator and find out why you guys can't see it. I will send out a group email as soon as I figure it out. That's really annoying. I'm sorry you can't see that. Well, that means we can't really discuss it too much because you don't see your feedback. When I do know that, I will send you guys an email. Otherwise, are there any other questions about the midterms in general? All right. Well, if you have any other questions, you can ask me. You know, I think we've covered kind of the lasting effects of World War II a little bit well. Hopefully you guys understand that there's a lot to it. Next time we will not have class on Thursday, just the same as this week. We will not have class on Tuesday, just the same as this week. And you'll be watching the video on the Cold War. And we'll come back and discuss that. Hopefully by then we'll have the feedback showing to you guys. I don't know why it's not showing. Otherwise, if you have any questions, free to ask them. Otherwise, have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Alicia, do you have a question?
Oh, no, sorry. Thank you.
Bye.